Sound check. Sound check. Okay, I think that's a bit better. So, ladies and gentlemen, today I will be reacting to the One Piece chapter 159, brief spoilers. So, this will be a, let me just say, I will be doing a recap of the previous chapter, mashing it together with today's or with recent events of One Piece. So, I know that as far as you're concerned, One Piece has been moving at a very slow rate, at a manageable pace, but I feel like, do you remember the text when we got to Elbaf? The text that said that you shouldn't linger for. Okay, let me start recording. So I'm not sure if you remember the text that the narrator said before Elbaf started, that you shouldn't linger for long in Elbaf. You know, you shouldn't linger for long in Elbaf. And at first we were like, okay, maybe we are here in Elbaf to stay, but now I do understand why it is very, very much risky for an individual to stay in Elbaf for a very long time. Because at this point we are very much lost in time. Only the end of the flashback can save us from this dilemma, which is being lost in time. And remember, while we are still in this very much, what do you call this? While we are still in this flashback, a lot can still happen. Just ample of things can happen. Like when you look at characters like King Harold, and when you know that Dory and Brogy are the closest ones to King Harold, I am sure that we are going to get something more from those characters, and we will go back in time more. So okay, I do have a problem. So let me try to. So to be clear, guys, I don't think that Teach is Zipek's son at all. I don't think that Teach is Zipek's son, because when we look at the difference in characters, it's too big. I know these people might look the same, or we might think that they are the same person, but I don't think that Zebek and Teach are the same people. Okay, I do understand that Teach might have had a very, very much tougher upbringing than Zebek himself, because we have to remember that Teach didn't have a father to grow up to, and we don't know the situation that Zebek was in, but knowing that his clan was endangered and they were hunted for sport, but you have to understand that Zebek and Teach are not the very, very same person. At some point, I was saying that Zebek and or Teach is not the man that Zebek was waiting for. I understand that he is Zebek's son and all that, but is he the man that Zebek was waiting for? Of course he is. No one else is going after the world in this generation, so it is quite a blessing that Teach is the one that carries his father's will, because in this One Piece world, a lot of people are chasing after gold, dear Rod. Let me just be clear, like, three of the four emperors are looking up to Gold D. Roger. Alright, Dile, how are you, G? It's been a while. Yo, alright, Dile, it's been a while, G. So, having a person that looks up to Zebek is quite good, but Zebek and Teach are not the same people. I know it's been maybe two weeks since we knew Zebek, or 2 to 3. But from the person we knew, like, even from keeping secrets from the likes of Kaido and Big Mom, I thought you were never coming back. I am back, G. It's been the internet, my boy. The internet has been tough on me, and even now, it's been quite a work of. It's working me out. I don't wanna lie, but I'm back, dog, and we have a lot to share. Volume is a bit low. Yeah, it's understandable. I'm not using YouTube. I'm streaming via OBS right now, and I haven't figured it out well as of yet, but yeah, I'm going to try to work on it before I do a Blue Lock stream again, because today I'm going to be live multiple times. It won't be only this time. I will be live very, very a lot today. But with that being said, I was still talking about Zebek, So Zebek is not the worst kind of pirate that we thought he was. At the end of the day, we have to put some respect on Zebek, and for him chasing his dreams and not being afraid of who he is until the end. We know that from the previous chapter, fate was against Zebek, because for some reason God Valley ended up being found by the Celestial Dragons, which is the worst case scenario when it comes to One Piece father figures, because we know that the biggest weakness in a character in One Piece has to do with who they are and their kids. If you're a D, that's a biggest weakness because everyone is against you. But when you are Zebek, things get a little bit more tougher because you have a secret clan. Ladies and gentlemen, a D clan has been revealed. Finally, we have some kind of understanding when we talk about the D clan. It's spoilers. I'll check in with you on the chapter reaction. Don't wanna be spoiled. No stress, G, no stress. But in the previous chapter, which was chapter 159, a lot of things that happened were just against Zebek and who he was at that point. Even he himself said it, that maybe it was timing that wasn't great. Maybe it was just fate. But Zebek truly chased his dreams till the very end. And now things look more and more likely that Zebek is not the person who we thought he was. You know, if we compare Zebek and Blackbeard, I'm telling you, they are not the same person. Okay, we might not know Zebek that closely like we know Whitebeard, but Blackbeard and Zebek are not the same people. You know, and that just shows how the things that Zipek was chasing, or the character who was Zipek, will never be brought back into action. You know, as much as we see everyone like riling around Roger and trying to be a pirate as great as Roger, but there will never be a pirate such as Zipek. Ladies and gentlemen, I know that that might sound a bit overwhelming, but it's true. You know, even when you look at the crew which Teach has built at this point, you know, I do understand that in the previous episode of One Piece, Van Alga said it himself that he is still in training when it comes to his devil fruit. But ladies and gentlemen, in the Rocks Pirates, even though you didn't have a devil fruit, you were still badass. People could fight without devil fruits in the Zebek Pirates, you know, which is quite something that's interesting. I don't wanna lie, and it shows that the group that Zebek leaded and the one that we see today from Teach, they're not the same. Even in strength and quality, they're not the same. Because at the end of the day, I do feel like even though Kaido and all the guys didn't respect Zebek to that point, you know, at the end of the day, they were all conquerors, but they did understand what Zebek stood for. A man of dreams, a man of ambition, you know. It was even shocking to them to find out that someone betrayed Zebek, or something such as betrayal happened in Zebek's island. You know, right now we understand that with this crew right now, they still operate the same as the Zebek pirates, but they're in different levels, ladies and gentlemen. I don't know if people understand that, but what we also saw in the previous chapter, I think it was the last meeting between King Harald and Rox Zebek. You know, I think it was quite a hurtful chapter because I really thought that it was okay. In chapter 158, the narrator did say that the two men will meet again during that incident. You know, and somehow we all knew that Zebek and who is this Zebek and Harald were going to meet at God Valley, you know, but I didn't feel like he was going to be put in the ocean to stop Zebek, you know. We should have considered that option, but it didn't happen the way we thought, you know. I really thought that King Harald would reach God Valley, but it seems like the King of Elbaf didn't go to God Valley at all, which explains a lot of things that happened there because I really doubt if the King of Elbaf was there or if he went to that island, would he have changed his perspective from the pirates of, or from for the world government, you know. But when we go to chapter 159, you know, we see that everyone in what's this island? Everyone in Hachinosu is fired up to go and save who is this girl? Shaky, you know. But this panel reminded me of Buggy and his island right now. You know, if you know Cross Guild and the island they are habiting right now, it really looks like Hachinosu and the time of Zebek. You know, just goofy characters waiting to do ambitious things. You know, like Hachinosu doesn't feel like Hachinosu right now, but wherever Cross Guild is right now, it feels like the previous Hachinosu. Because you have to understand that Baggy and who is this? It's Baggy. Who is this character I'm trying to call? Yes, Baggy and Teach operate in two different ways. But wherever Cross Guild is, it feels like Hachinosu before going to Godville. You know, because all the pirates that are with Cross Guild right now, I'm talking about the fodder pirates, you know, all of them are excited, all of them are ready to achieve big dreams, you know. These guys are ready to go for the One Piece. I'm sure the ones in Hachinosu, they are not as ready to go for the One Piece. So that is why I'm saying that Hachinosu doesn't feel like Hachinosu no more. But when you look at Cross Guild feels like Hachinosu. You know, so I think that's a very interesting development when it comes to One Piece. But we have to go to, when I go to chapter 159, the most interesting thing was seeing Dragon make an appearance as a Marine. You know, if you're with ATP or if you're subscribed to ATP like I am, if you have went balls deep into this anime situation, you know for facts that Dragon is a Marine, or we knew before because it was one of the speculations that were big in ATP community. Like the ATP community has been frank about Dragon being a Marine. So we finally find out that Dragon is a Marine. And then at this point you might ask yourself, what kind of a Marine was Dragon? And we understand that Dragon was not a random Marine, but he was open-minded. He questioned his orders. Unlike every other Marines, or maybe Akainu to be exact. We saw that Dragon is not like Akainu. Akainu follows his orders to the T. Even Kizaru might lazy around orders, but Akainu follows them to the end. But we see that in the previous chapter, Dragon doesn't follow any orders at all. When Dragon is told to shoot at civilians, he's like, why? Why are we shooting at these people? They're like, we are using tranquilizers, Dragon. It's going to be fine. Dragon is like, no, why are we doing that? So I'm happy to see Dragon question the orders which are given to him. Like, it's the same thing we expect from Cap. That Cap doesn't follow every order. So seeing that Dragon is doing the same thing, big ups to Dragon. But I think Dragon landed himself in a very sticky situation. I'm telling you, this situation would have been better if Roger was the one in Dragon's position, because asking Dragon to save Shamrock and Shanks, ladies and gentlemen, to ask Dragon to save Shamrock and Shanks against who? Galing. Is Galing's wife even on a proper mental state? Because that's not a challenge for Dragon at all. I don't know how you guys feel, but I feel like Dragon will get severely injured in this battle. I don't wanna lie. Because if he has to go against Figal and Galing, he stands no chance. I'm telling you, Figal and Galing almost killed Whitebeard in Godville. Or that's what we were told by Whitebeard himself, So Whitebeard, Dragon and who is this guy? And Galing won't end well at all. It won't end well, but this is a very big responsibility that was put in Dragon. She was like, please save my kids. And in this chapter we see that Dragon really worked towards saving Shamrock and Shanks. That's what the spoilers say. At the end of the spoilers say that Dragon saved Shamrock and Shanks. And I know you might say that Shamrock dying was not a bad situation. I agree with you. Like, if it were up to the gods of One Piece and the lightning that saved Monkey D. Luffy, it could have struck Shamrock. But when I look at these two previous chapters, I do feel like there will be a way to rescue Shamrock from his fate. Shamrock won't stay a bad guy for so long, or for a very long time. I'm telling you guys, because even though Shamrock might seem like he's a celestial dragon to the core, but you can tell that there were some things that bothered him enough to question reality. Because Shamrock met with Shanks once in his lifetime, and we don't know how that happened or what happened between the two brothers, but I really know that Shanks wasn't the type, or isn't the type of man to cower around any kind of situation. So I feel like Shamrock and Shanks fought. I think they clashed their ideals too. So I know that Shanks, we all fear the fact that Shanks might die because of Whitebeard. But we still have Shamrock, which is a W. I don't wanna lie. This is one thing that's great about twins, that even if Shanks dies anytime soon, it's fine. We have Shamrocks. Same character design. Shamrock just has to cut his hair a bit, lose his celestial dragonness and be a pirate. I think that we will have red hair again. It will be like having red hair 2.0. But the previous chapters, we were told that Shanks is a child of destiny. You know, it was in the previous chapter that Shanks is a child of destiny, but now we have two childs of destiny, which is Shanks and Shamrock. And I think that for any type of situation to move, maybe because at the end of the day, this is a war between the D clan and the Celestial Dragons, or Saint Imo of House Nerona and all the other house that supported Imo. But when you look at how the situation is, the deciders of the next war are going to be Shanks and Shamrock. You know, as much as Shanks was able to come into the war of the past and stop the war, you know, but if the world government had Shamrock on their side and the God Knights there, the fight wasn't ending there. Trust me, if Shamrock was in the war of the past and he saw his brother coming in to stop the war, I'm telling you, we would have had a God Knights versus the Red Hair Pirates right there and there, which would have been a peak fight for me. Because at the end of the day, Shamrock is the leader of the God Knights. And who is the leader of the Red Hair Pirates? It's Shanks himself. But this chapter makes it very, very much difficult. Or maybe it built up more hype between the fights of the world government, not even the world government, but God Knights versus the Revolutionary Army. It will mean more than it ever did to us. Like, imagine as Dragon, you figure out that you tried to save a kid from a fate that was bad, and then at the end of the day, you still find that kid, the red hair kid, because not many people have red hair. You still find the same red haired kid in a situation you tried to save him from. So this is going to be a difficult fight for Dragon, because I don't think Dragon against Shamrock will be a full fight from Dragon's side, because I think Dragon will try to continue his mission to save the kids, because at this point he was able to save one kid, which was Shanks. Now you have to ask yourself, what about Shamrock? And we know that Shamrock is the leader of the God Knights and Dragon is the leader of the Revolutionary Army. Imagine that, Dragon tried to save Shamrock and now his biggest threat is Shamrock himself. Like, Chad, I don't know if you feel Dragon is top 2. I do agree with that comment. Welcome, Seville, to the chat. Dragon is top 2. I do agree. But what happens between Dragon and Shamrock? What kind of a future do we want to see? But I really feel like Dragon will sell this fight. Dragon won't win a fight against Shamrock in any way. Because at the end of the day, it is his duty to save Shamrock. I don't know how Dragon was able to save Shanks from God Valley, but the mission wasn't complete. And his failure to complete the mission is coming to bite him back right now. Because Dragon and Shamrock is happening at the end of the day, because I had my own wishes when it comes to One Piece. I really wished for Kobe to meet Shanks before the final war. I know people might be like, why Kobe and Shanks? But for Kobe to become the god of this generation, he needs someone with immense amount of haki to battle with. Because we all know, fair, maybe some help. Yeah, some help will be needed between Shamrock and Dragon, I don't know that. But if Shanks is there to help Dragon, I think the situation will be better. Because I've seen in the previous or the previous moments in this chapter, people are like, the duo between Dragon and Shanks will be insane, because at some point I was like, there's no way where Shanks and Dragon work together. But when you look at how their relationship, or how we met both or three of these characters at the same time, it really shows that there might be a potential Dragon and Shanks combo coming up soon. I don't wanna lie. But if Shanks is not there to help Dragon against Shamrock, what will we do, or what will be Dragon's move? No, because Dragon has made a move, because we know that Mara Joyce is on fire. So Dragon might be up there where the celestial dragons are, and Shamrock was called back from the invasion of Elbaf. So yeah, Shamrock Dragon happening soon, soon. But that's not our biggest problem. Yo, I shows them. How are you, Chi? How are you? Welcome to the chat. But that's not our biggest problem right now. Bogart next chapter. Oh my god. I don't think we can get that much hyped. I don't think we can get more hype than we have right now, because after all the legends we've got right now, seeing Bogart in the next chapter in action. Oh my days. And I'm telling you, we are very close from the Bogart premiere. I'm really starting to believe so. When I think about it, Bogart is the only character we haven't seen move as of yet. We've seen Kaido versus Rocks before we've seen Bogart make a move. So seeing Bogart do anything, and I think it's really possible to see Bogart on the move, because Dragon is not safe right now. Like, severely, you hit the core of the situation. I don't wanna lie. Tariq, how are you? It's been a while. But Seville, you are in school. Put the phone down, Tariq, dog. Just enjoy school. Embrace school. You know. But Seville is right. If Dragon is in serious trouble, because Dragon is about to go against who is this guy? Dragon is about to go against Figal and Galing. We know that's going to happen because Dragon is the only person who is who is in a situation to protect Shamrock and Shanks. So Figal and Galing is coming for him really soon, And I really think that if Dragon is in a serious bind, Gap is not coming to save Dragon. We all know that. While the gods of Roger are still in the God Valley Island, I'm telling you, there is nothing more that Gap cares about. Gap doesn't give a fuck about where Dragon is at this point. Sorry about swearing, okay? But Gap doesn't care where Dragon is. But the man we would see potentially move towards saving Dragon is Bogart himself. So that would be a very, very hyped action. And if Bogart is in danger, I understand how Whitebeard could have stepped in to save both Bogart and Dragon. Because if there is a situation whereby Whitebeard and Figal and Galing is happening, there is no reason for Whitebeard to go against Figaland without a reason. But when we get more and more lore behind what happened from God Valley, it's science class. No, dog, you have to cancel the stream. Not during science class. Science is my favorite subject, dog. That's an insult to me and everyone who's watching anime at this point, Science is the core of everything else. So just enjoy class, Tariq. I'll be having another stream for Blue Lock and for One Piece again, so don't worry. You can dog off, Tariq. We will be back soon. Don't worry. I will be back. Maybe after school you will get me live. And ladies and gentlemen, let me just check what happened also in the previous chapter before I move to the next chapter. Tariq, dog, come on. You need to focus in class. Oh yeah. So we got to see who was on the move as well, Besides seeing who is this guy? Besides us seeing characters like Rocks and Gap on the move, not Gap, Roger on the move, but we get to see Gap get the message again that you need to go to God Valley. And this is becoming more and more frustrating because I don't know if it's going to be true the fact that the D or the David clan is going to be Buccaneers. If the David clan is for sure Buccaneers, how far can we go with this? Because one part of the D clan has been revealed. We know that we have the David clan, and do you have the Monkey clan? I'm not sure if the Monkey clan exists, but we do have the David clan that has been revealed. And this is very much big news because I don't know how I can basically say this to you guys because we've been asking ourselves who is the David clan. Roger redemption incoming. Like Saville, we really need something to redeem Roger because I've been saying this with my chat like for a very very long time that Zipek is not a bad guy. There should have been something that happened because even one of my biggest theories was true that if Ganko was at God Valley, then Imu was at God Valley. Because in the previous chapter we saw that Imu was in God Valley, or Ganko is in God Valley. Imu might be there, so Dome Rivesi is in the cards, But what made Roger go against Zebek? I understand that these guys might hate each other to the core, but we saw the guys together in Shaky's bar. We saw both Roger and Zebek in Shaky's bar singing Bing's Sake both together. Hello Sunita, how are you, Chi? How are you? This is very much insane because we saw both Roger and Zebek in the same bar. Like the tape was supposed to be put on Zebek, but Zebek was like, fuck no, put it on Teach. Bad stream. It's really bad. I don't know. My internet is bad. Sorry about that, G. But there has to be a reason why both of, because it's really very much interesting that we are lost in time, guys. Like the One Piece doesn't sound like the One Piece anymore. Like, which part of One Piece do you wish to be in? Because I'm fine where we are right now. I don't wanna lie. Like the past One Piece is starting to become the One Piece for me. Like this flashback One Piece, this God Valley One Piece is the only One Piece I want from going forward. I don't mind if Oda restarts the story from here and then he progresses with the story until Pirate King dies, and then execution dragon. It's fine where we are. I don't wanna lie. Like, I understand why Oda warned us before coming to Elbaf that we should be really careful for staying in Elbaf because we've lost time now. And with that being said, we don't know if Roger and Gap were in the good side with fighting against rocks. We don't. But something, flashback piece, dog. Flashback piece is peak piece. I don't wanna lie. Since we've been on this flashback piece, first it started like, I don't wanna lie. This flashback piece has provided more for us than we might realize. Flashback piece is peak, like for sure. I agree with you because when you look at it, Gaban knows about Imu's Conqueror's Haki. At first we were like, how? How does Scopa Gaban know about Imu's Haki? Because when Scopa felt Imu's Haki, he was like, fuck no, not that again. You feel me? So potentially Imu was in God Valley. It makes 100% sense now because we saw Ganko. Scopa Gaban knows about Imu or knows the Conqueror's Haki that's in, or the Conqueror that's in Elbaf right now. So when you look at things, we're really looking at what happened to Rocks during God Valley. Because One Piece told them props, One Piece. I'm not sure what. Maybe we were trying to say One Piece is dope. Yeah, One Piece is dope, dog. I don't know. One Piece is really, really cooking right now. One Piece is really, really cooking. But things don't get better. You know, things don't get better because as much as we are lost in time, I don't wanna lie. You know, as much as we are lost in time, where do we go next? You know, the biggest question is where do you go next at this point? Or about Emu. Oh, dog. You know, Emu is going to be a serious problem. I don't want to lie, Seven. Roger Crew, if it's a story, raw, you would be in the Roger Crew. I would go with the Rocks Pirates. I don't know. If you're saying that you will be in the Roger Crew, I don't know. But right now, I feel like I would be part of the Rocks Crew. You know, because as much as we might not like Teach, at the end of the story, I'm telling you, a lot of people will be supporting Teach more than we expect. You know, because right now, as we time traveled to the past in One Piece, rock stocks are up. You know, everyone is buying the rock stock, and we are selling the Roger stocks. Since the flashback began, like, there is no pirate that comes close to the bag himself. No one in One Piece comes close to the glory of the man himself. Even Emo was shaking in her boots or in his or her boots. You know, Emo doesn't fuck with rocks in no way or form. That's why I feel like when Emo saw the chance to kick rocks while he was down, Emo couldn't let that opportunity pass. You know, when they say kicking a dog while it's down is a bad thing, and not when it comes to rocks. No way. Like, I really believe that if you kick rocks while he's still down, you did a favor for history. You know, but that was the past me before we knew who Zebek was. You know, now that I know who Zebek is, you know, when they say you should know your past or you should know where you come from, this is what they mean. This is what they fucking mean, because what in the hell is happening with rocks? You know? What in the hell is happening with rocks? And okay, now I feel like I need to explain Teach. You know, I really feel like now I can understand why Teach is the way he is, because if Teach lost both his parents in God Valley, if Teach lost both of his parents in God Valley, that's unforgivable. Like, that's unforgivable, because you need to understand that Teach grew up with a lot of misery. A lot of misery, you know. And okay, maybe Teach didn't lose both of his parents from Godville because he didn't take the David D name, you know, and he didn't take the Rocks D, so we know that he wasn't raised by Rocks. So it might have been his mother who might be Marshall or Teach, we don't know. But whatever that happened in God Valley, oh my god, the internet. The internet is fucking me up. So I'm not sure how long we'll stay like this, but has been very much interesting. I don't like interesting developments in One Piece, you guys. But when we look at what was happening, Zebek gave Roger the head, but Doug, and it really seems like Zebek and Roger are close at this point. I don't wanna lie, you know. It really feels like Zebek and Roger were closer than we thought. Even with Garp. You know, because Zebek was talking about Garp like he knew who he was. Like he genuinely knew Gap that Gap hates orders from the brass. He told he told King Harald that with pride, you know. He was like, who? You're talking about Gap, joining Gap. The same man who hates the world government as much as I do. You know, and when you look at Rox, you're like, no ways. You know, when you look at Rox's relationship with Sheik, you're like, no ways. Who is Rox? But it feels like Rox is the leader that we all needed. And it might happen that Roger is from Godville too. Oh my fucking god. So the reconnection was successful. Thank you, Savelle boy, for sticking around, you know. Thank you very much, Savelle. Welcome into the chat, boy. But if Zipek gave, but I feel like anyone who gave Roger that head, I think they knew that Roger wasn't foolish enough to go and wish revenge against who is this? Against the world government, you know. I'm cut off again. Fuck. I'm cut off again. No man. Oh. This is boring. Especially because there are people who are watching right now and I'm not providing a very good stream at all. My stream is not good at all. Come on, man. This sucks, I don't know lie. This really sucks, the fact that I don't have internet like this. You know, and it's getting worse and worse by the day. Can't a brother stream, huh? Can't you guys let a brother stream? Yeah, my brother. Can't you just stream, my brother? I'm back, it seems. But yeah, let me try to be a bit louder because the volume is down, you know. So I really feel like the person who gave Roger the straw hat is someone that knew that Rox isn't strong, not even Rox, but he knew that Roger is not strong enough to go against the world government. You know, like, I really feel like someone in the One Piece world was both close to Zebek and Roger. You know, and the way that Zebek spoke about Roger, you know, Roger, how many times have I told you that this is my island? Oh my god. This is happening more than often now. Like this stream is becoming more and more tiring. But what I'm trying to say is that it doesn't feel like it's the first time where Rox and Roger were meeting. You know, it sounded like Rox and Roger had a relationship prior to Shaky moving to what do you call this, to Hachino's, you know. But you might feel like, okay, we know that Roger and Rox met multiple times before, you know, Hachinosu. But the way he said it, that Roger, how many times have I told you before that this is my island? You know, at the end of the day, it sounds like Roger and Zebek held a very, very good relationship, you know, and that is why I'm saying that there might be someone who is giving us a link between Rox and Roger, you know, because when you look at it, they are both from the D clan, you know, as they are both from the D clan. He told Rox before that this is his island, you know. So I don't know if this is out of the blue, but it really feels like it's a Ace and Luffy kind of a relationship. I know they don't look brotherly like Ace and Luffy, but it feels like they were brought up by the same individual, and Rox had to go into the ocean before, or maybe Rox went to his adventure before Roger did. You know, it sounds like that, but Zipek and Roger are not that much different. You know, the only difference is that he is going for the world and the other one was going for the One Piece. But when did Roger find out about the One Piece? You know, when did Roger know about the biggest treasure out there? Because some may some may be asking themselves as to how did Roger get into that adventure to begin with? I have the same question, you know, but who could have done this to Roger? You know, because no one out of the blue can be like, there's an island beyond the one we think is a final destination. No, that information has to come from someone, you know. But whoever gave Roger the straw hat, I think he knew that Roger had to stop Zebek at some time, because Zebek would have done something before, you know. Zebek would have blown the plan for the entire D-Clan, because right now it might look like the D-Clan is separated into different groups, you know. Other groups of the D-Clan want to get the One Piece. Teach is leading the front whereby when it comes to conquering the whole world, you know. But where do these dreams come together? Because at the end of the day, I do feel like the D clan is chasing the same dream, you know, and this thing has to happen simultaneously. Like, as much as Loki signified that when he gets out of the chains, Ragnarok will start. That's true. Like, that is 100% true. Like, when Loki is released from the chains and Loki meets Teach, and then they agree, unlike their parents, because Harald and Zebek didn't go on an adventure together. But trust me, if Loki and Teach agree and then they make their move against the world government, I hope the crew or the Blackbeard pirates are ready by then, because we don't have the time for them to be not ready like they were. Because the first time they met Shanks, they weren't ready to fight Shanks. You know, when the Blackbeard pirates met Akainu, they weren't ready to fight Akainu. You know, when Van Agua was in Egghead Island, he couldn't teleport back to Hachinosu. No, he teleported same island, which is Egghead Island, and he said what? He was still in training. Now that I'm feeling myself like this, okay, so it's the time is getting further and further. Shanks is the first Yonko out. Oh, that question is serious. That question is really, really dope, and I would like to answer it. F. Shanks is the first Yonko to God. That sounds so deep. I don't wanna lie. That's the worst case scenario. I don't wanna lie. I just can't lie and say there will be a very better situation than that. No, there won't be. There absolutely won't be a situation worse than Shanks dying out. Because as much as the One Piece world has strong characters around it, nothing can be Luffy-fied, you know. Oh shit. Oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit. Like, what the fuck is this, dog? Reconnection is successful, but yeah, we are back. Would help Blackbeard though. It would though, nah? It would. Like, Savelle said something very interesting right now, that Shanks dying would help it would help teach out a lot, you know. I do agree. Would push him past Yonko's. Yeah, it would. It would put him in a very different class than anyone else. But the problem is, if Shanks dies, the forces against the forces against the world government will be weak. You know, sorry for the low quality stream, but if it has to be a fight against the world government without Shanks, that would be very difficult. I don't wanna lie. You know, so Shanks will be needed for the war, especially the final war. You know, so I really think that there will come a time whereby Shanks doesn't need to stop Teach. You know, because I feel like Shanks was trying to force Teach into waiting for the correct time. Nah, man, can't stream like this. This is just bullshit. This is world class bullshit. Like, a army without Shanks is not an army at all, you know. But we know we have Shamrock, but Shamrock doesn't look like the character to switch sides. You know, I really think that Shamrock will be a celestial dragon till the very end. Is Scar too significant? He out. Even though he's out, you know, but there is no other crew to lead the war against the world government other than the Red Hair Pirates. You know, it's we have to have the Red Hair Pirates and Doflamingo when it comes to the final war. You know, so it will be very much significant for Teach if Shanks were to die, but I don't think there will be a situation whereby Shanks dies before getting the One Piece, you know, because At the end of the day, Shanks made a promise to his captain to go and find the One Piece. So there is no excuse for Shanks not to make it to Lafty. And I do feel like Teach and Luffy are going to meet before Shanks versus Luffy. Maybe he only sees it then dies. Oh my god. That would be a fitting end for Shanks. I don't wanna lie. You know, it would be very much insane if then Baggy awakened. No ways. That would be peak fiction, dog. That would be very much peak fiction. Like fiction out of this world. Because if Shanks refuses to die before he makes it to Laugh Tape, because he won't lose to Baggy. Because he just refuses to lose to Baggy. That would be insane. You know? And then if Baggy awakens. But Baggy is strong. Baggy is already strong. It's just the matter of picking opponents, but I really feel like Baggy is not that far off because he is capable of using his devil fruit very well. He knows his devil fruit very well, but as to awaken, it would be insane. If Baggy was to awaken, oh my god. It's fine, even if Baggy doesn't awaken, but can Crocodile awaken his Zoan fruit? Is it Zoan or is it Paramecia? Or is it Logia? Yeah, it's Logia. If Crocodile can awaken his Logia fruit, I think that would be fine. And I really would like to see Mihawk go full out. Or Mihawk battle like proudly so, But after the chapter, which is chapter 159, what the fuck? What's up, why? But when we look at Baggy, right now Baggy is the only character who is he talking alone? Yes, I am talking alone. Welcome to the stream with 0 viewers. It's fine. I talk alone. I do talk alone. Then it's fine. But it's been a W stream ever since. But if we have to look at Baggy is the only pirate who doesn't have a background as of yet. Everyone else we know about them. Trust me, we know about Shamrock and Shanks right now. We thought there was Shanks only, and then we find out there's Shamrock. Which is very good. I don't wanna lie. This is very much a great development. And as we see how Dragon left the Marine and fell to the sides of the revolutionary, or how did Dragon become a revolutionary? It's so interesting. But the only person we don't have a backstory to is Baggy. And I really think that Baggy will be the final factor when it comes to the One Piece endgame. People might think that the end game of One Piece might happen because of Teach and all that, but it will be Baggy with his days. I feel like if there is anyone in the situation of turning the world upside down, it's Baggy. And if there is the world's most famous pirate, we know who that is. Baggy the Genius Jester. Why? Because this man was broadcasting the War of the Best like it was a live stream. Baggy was the man who was leading the War of the Best, or the broadcasting of War of the Best. At some point he was the only streamer who was streaming War of the Best to the civilians. It was Baggy. So meteor treasure from the moon, surely that would send Baggy crazy. I don't know. But are you saying that Baggy is a treasure from the moon? That would be insane. But I think that when Baggy comes into action, because even though Mihawk and Crocodile are against Baggy, but you can tell that something that Baggy said hit them very hard. They were like, we are not going to fight Luffy, Shanks, and Blackbeard on your behalf. And then Buggy was like, I'm not a fighter, you guys, and I won't expect you guys to fight, While they are all fighting and playing pirate, we will be plundering the real treasure. You know, so Buggy is not going to fight his way to the number one position. No, the nigga doesn't need to awaken. Nah, you know, all we need right now is for Hawkeye and Crocodile to act as, what do you call this when you disturb someone, but a divergence or something like that, But Crocodile and Mihawk will be the distraction, and the Cross Guild, as funny as they are, they will be stealing all the treasure in one piece. It will be like we never saw this coming, but it will happen, you know, because we know how dumb Buggy is and how oblivion other characters are to Buggy, because Buggy isn't strong, Buggy, you cannot sense his strength through Conqueror's Haki. So Buggy can get through any detection systems when it comes to Haki. You cannot sense Buggy when it comes to Haki, because Buggy doesn't have the will to kill. I don't know what they call this, but whatever Buggy will do in the final war, ladies and gentlemen, because you have to understand that the world government leads when it comes to secrecy, and if there is someone who will focus on broadcasting the final war, if there will be a man who will broadcast the final war, it won't be Morgans. No, Morgans won't be the one who is displaying, or who is just streaming the final war, because Morgans will be busy with newspapers. I know that at that time the newspapers will be going crazy. It will be peak. There will be spoilers landing each and every part of the One Piece world. But when it comes to the final war, we are going to see the war through Buggy's eyes once again, because he has done it before. What would stop him from doing it again? So Buggy will be the greatest decider when it comes to the One Piece. And after we just found out that Moria is from the Kozuki clan, fuck, the internet just fucks with me again. When I'm in my peak, the internet just decides to fuck with me again. This is boring. This is really, really boring. This is just tiring. At this point, I don't wanna lie. This is really demanding a lot from me. But Buggy is going to be the leader of everything, because Shanks and other characters will be focusing on fights, at that time. Fights will be very much important for the other guys, but what will Buggy be doing? That's the biggest question out there. What will Buggy do? But when we look at another thing that happened in the last chapter, I don't know how evil can Figureland Garling get. I already hated Figureland Garling for killing Mosgard Don Quixote. The death of Mosgard was the last straw for me when it comes to Saint Figureland Garling. I couldn't forgive him after that. And then he killed an innocent woman just because he doesn't want to marry her. Like, how Celestial Dragon can you get as Figureland Garling? Can you get better or worse than that? To be specific, because Garling is the trashiest of the trashiest trashes. Like, I don't want anything to do with Garling. I don't want to defend Garling in any way or form. The only reason why Shamrock is like this today is because of Figureland Garling. If you disagree with that, that's fine. But Figureland Garling is worse than every Celestial Dragon we have ever seen. Worse. Like, I hate to say this, but seeing, and I had this thought previously, that Doflamingo doesn't deserve to be a Don Quixote. You know, a lot of people might be like, nah, Doflamingo is peak when it comes to the Don Quixote family. But no, you know, everyone except Doflamingo has been a real guy from the Don Quixote family. I don't wanna lie. You know, look at Don Quixote Moscard. You know, this man knew that Shirahoshi was Poseidon. You know, Don Quixote Moscard knew that Shirahoshi was Poseidon. Did he tell anyone in the celestial realm? No. You know, he even stopped the other celestial dragons from harming Shirahoshi because he knew that if Shirahoshi were to activate his powers then and there, like their homeland will be done for. You know, that's what he said. He said to that other, it's Saint Carlos or Saint Charles or something like that. But when Saint Carlos was trying to get Shirahoshi, Saint Moscard came, or was it Moscard or something like that? He came and he stopped Charles from kidnapping Shirahoshi because he knew that Shirahoshi is a weapon, and if this continued against Shirahoshi would crash momentarily, and everyone would know that Shirahoshi is a Poseidon or is an ancient weapon. You know, like I know people might find it funny that the world government had an ancient weapon with them and they didn't know. But shout out to Mosgard for keeping that a secret till the end. You know, that is why I'm saying that Don Quixote do Flamingo doesn't deserve the Don Quixote name. No ways. Don Quixote do Flamingo is a psychopath, and that doesn't work with the Don Quixote family because I know people might feel like whatever Doflamingo's dad did, because the father of Doflamingo took them out of marriage-wise. You know, the Don Quixote family ended up being like, you know what, we're going to live as normal people. I'm fucking lagging so hard. You know, but the Don Quixote family was like, you know, we are going to live marriage-wise and live as commoners. You know, and then at the end they were like, you know what, you're going to regret your decision. And then he was like, I won't regret my decision, but the only reason that Doflamingo's family was killed is because of Doflamingo himself. You know, Doflamingo couldn't let go of his celestial dragon roots. You know, Doflamingo wanted everyone to bow to their knees. See you next. No stress, Saville. Thank you for the support, Chi. Thank you very much for the support. Really much appreciated. But Doflamingo was the reason why his father and mother were burned alive. You know, and the reason why he lived is because he was strong. So he was. You know, we don't fucking care about that. But whatever, Doflamingo is not a Don Quixote. He doesn't deserve that name because he makes characters like Rosinante bad if he's sharing the same name with them. You know, that is why I'm saying that Don Quixote do Flamingo doesn't deserve his surname. The Don Quixote have been the straightest people we've ever seen in One Piece. Imagine, besides the fact that they were celestial dragons, but the Don Quixote family is the toughest family we know of. You know, because Corazon, you know, when you look at Corazon, he was adopted by Sengoku, you know, but from birth he didn't want to become the same man as Doflamingo. That's why they parted ways. He was like, I'm not staying with this guy. But he went back to spy on his brother because his brother was doing things that he didn't approve. You know, that was Rosinante from his side. Saint Mosgard, Don Quixote, betrayed celestial dragons. But we all know that he didn't betray celestial dragons. Mosgard didn't do such a thing. Okay, he did. He could have told them that he found the Poseidon, but he kept it a secret because he's a Don Quixote, a real G, a tough G. Like as that's how the Don Quixote family needs to be. And then you have a scum which is Doflamingo. he doesn't do any justice to that family name at all. You know, it's like putting Shanks into the Figureland family. Shanks is not a Figureland. Shanks is not a Figureland. No way. No fucking way is Shanks a Figureland. Trust me, guys, because even though they might look the same, even though they might have like the same face, but Shanks is not a Figureland. Do you get me? Shanks deserves his mother's surname, in fact, not Figureland. No, we need to find out who Shanks's mother is to be exact, and then we call Shanks by the surname of his mother. The Figureland don't deserve Shanks. Even Uta of Uta, the Uta who is probably dead, they don't deserve Uta. In fact, can we switch? Can we take Doflamingo and give him to the Don Quixote, to the what's this family, to Shamrock's family? You know, we can take Shamrock and Figureland Garling, and then we take Doflamingo and then we adopt him to that family, and then we take Shanks and we introduce him to the Don Quixote family. Because if there is a family in Marijuana that has a D in their name, it's the Don Quixote. In fact, they deserve it. Let's just move the first D and put it as Don Quixote. Quixote, you know. It's fine even if they become the Quixote clan, but they deserve the D name because they did, in fact, they did more for the One Piece world, more than anyone else. You know, the Don Quixote family progressed One Piece in directions that Celestial Dragons wouldn't approve. Like, when it comes to Moscard, Doflamingo's dead, and Corazon, you know, those three guys, Celestial Dragons, but they did something that only a D clan can do. I am telling you, you guys, when you look at Moscard kept Shirahoshi safe for 20 years because Moscard was the first person to come across the ancient weapon Poseidon. And then what did Moscard do? Moscard kneeled on his knees and then he promised that he won't tell the world who Shirahoshi is. You know? Did he do that? Yes. You know, he stood by his word till the very end. And then when it comes to Doflamingo's dead, he was like, no, you know, I know that we've been living as Celestial Dragons, but I want to know what it feels like to live as a normal human being. You know, I'm leaving Marijuana to go to the lower realm and to live as a normal human being. You know, and then you have Rosinante. You know, because Doflamingo's brotherhood has the most has made the most change in One Piece. I don't know, but I think I can stop the stream here. You know. Okay, but let me just put the Don Quixote thing to an end. But Rosinante saved what's Law's fruit again? But the immortal Sechar wouldn't have been possible if Doflamingo performed it on himself. You know, so it's the OP Open on Me. You know, Rosinante took the OP Open on Me, one of the most important devil fruits to the world government. You know, because we know that another immortality surgery would have been beneficial for the world government. No cap, especially for characters like Ganko, because if Imo dies, she could maybe take the body of Ganko, you know. That's when an immortality surgery would have been most useful. But Rosinante gave it to Law, a D. So yeah, let me stop yapping and just thank you for the stream, guys. Everyone who showed up, thank you very much. I appreciate y'all, boys. I appreciate y'all, boys. Muchly appreciated to the ones that made it to the stream, those that joined the chat and subscribed. Those are the real G's. Those are the real G's.